Luke chapter 22, but beginning in verse 1, we're going to read the first 6 verses, I think, for our discussion this morning. Luke chapter 22, verse 1. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. The chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, Jesus, for they feared the people. Then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being the number of the 12, and he went his way and communed with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him unto them. And they were glad, and they coveted to give him money. And he promised and sought opportunity to betray him unto them in the absence of the multitude. And we had concluded last week our discussion of Luke chapter 21 with verse 37. In the daytime he was teaching in the temple, and at night he went out to the Mount of Olives. And all the people, verse 38, came early in the morning to listen to him teach every day in the temple. But now it seems, and as we remember, Jesus has come into Jerusalem for this Passover feast. There's a lot of folks in Jerusalem now. This feast is getting very close. The same scenario is described, of course, in Matthew and Mark. They tell us that it's going to be in 2 days. But Luke here says it's simply getting closer. But notice he says there it's the feast of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover. Was there a difference between the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread? Let's do a little background here so we can understand what we're talking about. Was there a difference between the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, or are they one and the same? Notice, if you would, Leviticus chapter 23. Go with me, if you would, to the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 23. This is the Lord instructing Moses, his servant here, giving some instructions as to what these people are to do when they finally get to the promised land. Leviticus chapter 23, well, let's begin in verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, Concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feast. Here's the first one, number 3, verse 3. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is a Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. And that, of course, is simply one of the 10 Commandments, to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Work 6 days a week. On Saturday, if you would, our 7th day, you're not going to do any work on Saturday. You're going to rest at your houses. But notice the first one here, or the second one, verse 4, verse 5 rather. Second feast. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. Verse 6, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread. So in other words, go back to verse 5, on the 14th day of the first month, this would be January the 14th for us, the way we would think about it. January the 14th, we're going to observe the Passover. The next day, January the 15th, we're going to start 7 days of unleavened bread. Notice verse 7, in the first day, now we've observed the Passover on the 14th of January. The next day, the 15th, we're starting 7 days of unleavened bread. Verse 7, in the first day ye shall have a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile or laborious work therein. But you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days, and the 7th day is a holy convocation. You're going to not do any work on that day either. So they observe the Passover, and immediately the next day they begin serving or observing 7 days of unleavened bread. So there was a difference between the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread.
Numbers of Leviticus.
Leviticus. That was Leviticus.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The Passover was...
Numbers says about the same thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it does. Yep. But the Passover was always observed the day before the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The next day, well, the 15th, they were to begin this observance of 7 days of unleavened bread. There was to be no leaven. They could not eat unleavened or leavened bread. They were to eat unleavened bread. All leaven was to be done away with. No leaven was to be eaten. Why was that? Well, why were they observing this Passover, and why are they observing this unleavened bread stuff? It's got to be reminded them of something.
That was their deliverance out.
Pardon me?
That was deliverance out.
Okay, go with me back to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12, I'm almost at Exodus, there it is. Exodus chapter 12, beginning in verse 7, looks like. This is the God's instructions to Moses as to how they are to observe this Passover feast. Exodus chapter 12. They're to take a sheep or a goat and they're going to pin it up and begin to feed this sheep. Verse 6, Exodus chapter 12, verse 6, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. If you go back to verse 2 in Exodus chapter 12, he's talking about the first month in the year. You're going to keep this sheep pinned up, and feed it until the 14th day of the first month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And notice verse 7. The sheep that they've all killed, they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door post of the house, wherein they shall eat it. And of course, that was to symbolize or to show what we would call the death angel when it passed over Egypt, where these Israelites were enslaved. When they saw the blood smeared around the doorpost on the outside, they passed over that house and went to the Egyptians' houses. And all the firstborn son of the Egyptians died that night, the infant children. But notice also how they were to eat this. Let's see.
You know, Ricky, one thing to point out, we use the word a lamb or the lamb. Each man had a lamb. It was multi-lambs. It wasn't one.
Right. And if you read it, and I thought of that. This whole thousands, millions of people eating one lamb. No, they all have their own lamb. Yes.
Sometimes when you read this, you need one lamb. No,
yeah.
Each household.
Yeah. But I had to understand that they caught this thing up. It was a lamb without blemish. They pinned him up and fed him for a while. They got him ready. And then they sacrificed him on the 14th day of January. But notice verse 11. And thus shall you eat it. Notice. With your loins girded. Be fully dressed. Where'd it go? Have your shoes on your feet. Have your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. What's the rush?
Because they're fixing to get out of Egypt.
You're leaving tonight.
You're leaving soon.
You're leaving soon. So get this, eat. You know, we don't have time to boil it or fry it. We're going to roast it over a fire. We don't have time to make leavened bread. You know, that takes a while for the bread to rise and, you know, whatever that all entails there. We don't have time for all that. Roasting, eat unleavened bread, and do that fully clothed, fully dressed, shoes on, staff in hand, have your bags packed, get your toothbrush with you, because you're leaving very soon. Do it in haste. And of course, that was followed by 7 days of unleavened bread. You know, it took them a while, I would think, to reach the Red Sea, to cross over the sea there. And they're still trying to escape the Egyptians there. Still don't have time to bake bread. So they're eating unleavened bread now on their way out of Egypt. And of course, that all got better when they got to the promised land. Anyone have any comment about any of those things? And Andy, I was trying to think. I won't go to Exodus 13 and verse 7. Let me go there before I ask Andy about this. Notice Exodus chapter 13 and verse 7. They could have no leaven anywhere about them. Exodus 13 and verse 7. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days. There shall be no leavened bread be seen with you. Neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all your quarters, or where you live. And isn't there a place in Matthew, and I couldn't find it, where they went and cleaned the cupboards, they wiped them out to make sure they got the crumb of leaven? I mean, they cleaned the cupboards out and made sure their house was swept clean of leaven. I mean, it was that important to get rid of the leaven, but I never did find it, and maybe I just imagined that. But at any rate, they couldn't eat leaven. They were not to have it even in their house, Edgar.
I was just reading there, you said you couldn't find it, I don't know exactly what you said, I want to listen.
Okay, well, go ahead.
You said, they shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it, according to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall not keep it.
Yeah, they got to eat the whole thing or burn it then.
Talking about the bread. Yeah.
Right, yeah, get rid of it. I don't know why they had to get rid of everything, but they were told to get rid of it. But Andy, I may have dreamed that. I don't know. I don't know. Anyone have any comment? Notice verse 2 now. The Passover is going to be here in a day or two. Verse 2, the chief priests and the scribes, they're trying to figure out how they're going to kill Jesus, but they've got a problem that they fear the people. We got to find out how we can get rid of him, but they're afraid of all these people. Now, people are in Jerusalem now for the Passover. Lots of people are there in Jerusalem to observe the Passover. Notice, if you would, Matthew chapter 26. Now, why is that a big problem? Matthew chapter 26, there's a lot of people there. Well, just go out and arrest him and take him out there and hang him up on the cross. Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 3. Notice verse 2. You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, the Son of Man is to be betrayed and crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people under the palace of the high priest, who is called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. And I'm trying to find the rest of this that I'm going to look at. Well, okay, the next verse. Verse 5, and they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Jesus was sort of popular. People liked him. He was doing a lot of good. And there's a lot of people here in Jerusalem for the Passover, and so, we better wait till, the crowd dies down, or at least we can arrest him privately somewhere. In Acts chapter 12, notice Acts chapter 12. This is where Herod had arrested James, the brother of John, put him in prison, and had him beheaded. Acts chapter 12, verse 1, and about the time Herod the king stretched forth his hand to vex certain of the church, he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, the Pharisees, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. Same thing is fixing to happen. We're going to get rid of Peter also. Verse 4, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Easter there, I think, should have been translated Passover. But Herod decided, after the Passover, we got him in prison. After the Passover, we'll kill him too. But we don't want to do that during when all these people are here in town. It might make them mad. They feared the people. Jesus had developed a very large following here, and people liked him. Notice John chapter 11. They were afraid of the people because they might get mad at them. John chapter 11, verse 47 and 48. But let's see. Let me think of where I am here now. He's come out and he's raised Lazarus from the dead. Notice verse 45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and heard and had seen the things which Jesus did, they believed on him. People had heard Mary and Martha and Lazarus' friends had heard Lazarus had died. They've gone out there to comfort Mary and Martha. Jesus shows up. He raises him from the dead. They were there, and they saw Lazarus, the dead person, for 3 days. He's alive now, and they saw what Jesus did. They believed on him. But notice verse 46. Some of them went in their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. That would be natural. If I saw somebody raised from the dead, I'd probably run to the first house I could tell somebody. That's just, they weren't really reporting this, I think. Notice verse 47. The Pharisees have heard what's happened now. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees of council and said, what are we going to do? This guy's doing many miracles. But look, if we leave him alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans are going to come and take away both our place and our nation. They despised the man. He was doing a lot of good. People loved him. You know, they liked him a whole lot. You know, when he made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem there. Notice John chapter 12, verse 1. We're back at Mary and Martha's house now. Lazarus had been raised from the dead. Then Jesus 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. Notice verse 9. Much people of the Jews therefore knew that Jesus was there at Lazarus' house. And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but they wanted to see Lazarus, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. I heard Lazarus came back to life. I heard this man Jesus raised him from the dead. Jesus is back out there in his house. Let's go out there and see both of them. They wanted to see Lazarus again alive, and they want to see this man Jesus who had raised him from the dead. Notice verse 10, but the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus to death also. He raised him from the dead, but we're going to get rid of Jesus, but we got to get rid of Lazarus too. We'll just kill him. Again, verse 11, because that by reason of him, Lazarus, many of the Jews went away and they believed on Jesus. He had this huge following. People liked him. And now they're trying to figure out a way that they can have him arrested and without inciting a riot there in Jerusalem. So they regarded this man Jesus as a prophet, just like they regarded John the Baptist as a prophet. And then they regarded Jesus as being a prophet also. Anyone have any comment? The people have placed a lot of hope and trust in this fellow Jesus. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and they want to kill both Lazarus and Jesus. This is the hope of Israel, and they want to kill him. Notice Matthew chapter 4. Well, why do they want to kill this guy? And we'll see that in just a minute. Because they just didn't like what he was doing, and I think that was the reason there. Matthew chapter 4, beginning in verse 23. Jesus went about all Galilee. Now, he's not in Jerusalem. He's not in Judea. He's way up north in Galilee. And he's teaching in the synagogues. He's preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He's healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. His fame went throughout all Syria. And they brought him a lot of sick folks. Notice verse 25. And there followed Jesus great multitudes of people from Galilee and from Decapolis and from Jerusalem and from Judea. He had people following him from all over, even from Jerusalem and Judea, up there in Galilee. You know, he was well liked by the people. Notice Mark chapter 3. These people had a dilemma. Well, how are we going to kill him now? Because everybody loves him. Mark chapter 3, beginning in verse 4. Jesus is fixing to heal a man in the synagogue that has a withered hand. And they're standing there. This is the Sabbath day, of course. They're standing there watching him, see if he will heal on the Sabbath day. This is going to be a big, big no-no here now, except for the guy that's going to be a benefit from the withered hand. And verse 4, he said unto them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they held their peace. They went, well, how are we going to answer that? You know, we can't answer that. Verse 5, and when he had looked around about on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he said unto the man, stretch forth your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. Verse 6, and the Pharisees went forth and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they could destroy him. He's doing good. Why do they want to kill the guy? They're trying to figure out, Linda, now how we can kill him without making everybody angry at them. Why would anyone want to do that? You know, even the apostle didn't understand. So look back to Luke chapter 18 with me. Jesus had predicted that this was going to happen. Luke chapter 18, verse 31, and he took unto him the 12 and said unto them, behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man shall be accomplished. He shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and he mocked, despitefully entreated, and spit on. They'll scourge him and put him to death, and the third day he shall rise again. Verse 34, the disciples, they understood none of those sayings. They didn't understand any of that. They probably didn't understand why they wanted to kill him. Why did they want to kill him? Notice Matthew chapter 27. This is a human trait. We're fixing to look at a human trait. We're going to fix and look at a human trait that this man Judas possessed, that we all can also possess both these human traits even today. Matthew chapter 27, verse 15. Verse 17, where's it at? Verse 18. For Pilate knew that for envy they delivered him. Envy. People liked him. They liked him. He was doing a lot of good. But because of envy, they had delivered him. Back up to verse 15, Matthew chapter 27, verse 15. Now at the feast, the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner when they would. Well, this Passover feast and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, they had this tradition. The Roman governor would just release a Jewish prisoner. That's a good gesture. We're going to release this Jewish prisoner to you. So he knows it's time to do that. Verse 16, and they had a notable prisoner called Barabbas. He was a murderer. He was involved in sedition and uprising there in Jerusalem. Somebody had got killed and he had got blamed for it. And so he brought this up. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom will you that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called the Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him there. He hadn't done anything wrong. And surely they're going to ask, well, release Jesus then. We can't turn the murderer loose. Notice verse 21. The governor answered, verse 20, the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas, and let's destroy Jesus. Verse 21, the governor answered and said, whether twain will you that I release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said unto them, well, what do you want me to do with Jesus, which is called the Christ? And they all said unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why, what evil hath he done? Pilate knew that he hadn't done anything wrong. Pilate knew that they were jealous and envious of this guy, so they drug him in there because they just did not like him. And of course, the next verse, it says that Pilate washed his hands of the whole matter. He told them, well, y'all take care of it. Arrested him because of envy. He had this fame, he had this large following, he was doing a lot of good, not because of his guilt, but because of his goodness. He had been arrested, and he's going to be crucified. Notice Acts chapter 13. This envy continued after Christ arose from the dead and after he ascended into heaven. Acts chapter 13, we have here Paul and Barnabas preaching in verse 43, and when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. Verse 44, the next day, notice this, came almost the whole city together to hear the word of God. They've been in town one Sabbath, and the next Sabbath, everybody's word got out. Paul and Barnabas are going to be back. The whole town's coming. Notice verse 45, and when the Jews saw the multitudes, they were filled with envy. Them folks never did turn out for me, Linda. They didn't turn out to hear me. And here these two are in town briefly, and everybody in town turned out to hear them. And because of that envy that those folks had, they began to tear down what Paul and Barnabas were trying to build up and trying to teach. And of course, that continues today. The human trait that we all possess. We got to control our envious nature, our jealous nature towards other people. And that's very easily to become have ourselves involved in. But notice, if you will, let's go back to Matthew chapter 26, I think it was, 27. Notice something. I've read this all my life, never paid it a whole lot of attention. Notice verse 19. He's already asked, or understood that for envy they brought him there. Verse 19. When Pilate was set down in the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Pilate have nothing to do with that just man. For I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. Ever thought about that? This is Pilate's wife. She's had a dream, she's had a vision. She's understood from this vision, this dream, there ain't nothing wrong with that man. And so she sent a message to her husband. Pilate, that man is just. Stay away from all that. Don't get involved in that. I've had a dream, and I know that he's just. Pilate's wife, as well as Pilate, came to the defense of this man Jesus. Where's his apostles?
They scattered.
The opposite. Sir, go ahead.
Peter already denied him.
Well, not yet.
Well,
Getting close. But Matthew 26. Jesus had been betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Verse 56. He fixed to be led off, but all this was done that the scripture of the prophet might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him, and they fled. They ran off, verse 58. But Peter followed him afar off. The 12 apostles ran. Now we got Pilate's wife defending him. As Andy just said, Peter's going to deny him. Judas is going to betray him. Pilate's wife is going to try to defend him. She knew him. She'd been told in a dream. The chief priest had pronounced it that he's worthy of death. Pilate found no fault in him. Pilate's wife has showed concern for this man Jesus. It took a lot of ups and downs to put Jesus to death. And maybe those people, these chief priests, figured that out. We want to kill him, but we got to be careful what we do here, because we could upset a whole lot of people. They were worried. Look at Luke chapter 20. Luke chapter 20, verse 6. We discussed it this weeks ago. That they come to him in verse 2, and he's teaching in the synagogue. And they ask him, tell us by what authority you're doing this stuff. Who gave you this authority being here teaching this kind of stuff? And of course, he asked them the question, well, John the Baptist, baptism, was it from God or was it from men? And of course, they wouldn't answer that. Verse 6, but if we say of men, all the people will stone us. We can't say it was from men. They're going to stone us. John the Baptist was popular too. And so they had to be careful about how they treated that question. They had to be careful about how they're going to arrest Jesus and put him to death. They were afraid to speak against John the Baptist. Now they're afraid to arrest Jesus. And so we got to find a way to get a hold of him. Anyone have anything to say? Let's go back to Luke chapter 22, verse 3. Here comes Judas. Then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being of the number of 12. Judas was a scapegoat. He was condemned when he was born. He could not prevent this, Linda, from happening to him because he was handpicked to betray Jesus. There's nothing he could do. Is that true? Andy, don't look at me in that tone of voice now. That of course is not true. But notice what it says. Satan entered into Judas. The devil made him do it. The devil is the one that made him do that, Andy. Out of his control. Go with me back to Luke chapter. Sir, no.
Not out of Jesus' control.
No, but I've heard that all my life.
Judas was still in control of his faculty and his reasoning capability. It was the sin of greed. It was sin that caused it, tempted by Satan, but Judas succumbed to it.
Okay. That's exactly right. But notice something about Judas here. Go back to Luke chapter 9. Was Judas any different from the other 11 apostles? No. Luke chapter 9, beginning in, verse 1. Jesus called his 12 disciples together. Notice this, that he gave the 12 power and authority over all devils, and he gave them power and authority to cure diseases. And he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. Verse 6, and they departed, the 12, this includes Judas, and went through the towns preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Judas had the Spirit of the Lord. He had the Spirit that he could cure diseases. He could cast out devils. And yet Satan, the devil, has entered into Judas.
Don't confuse the word demon with Satan.
Okay?
Demon is demon possession, like those that went into the spirit of the divination of the pigs and other things.
Okay.
Satan was the tempter that tempted Job to oppose himself to God from time to time.
Okay.
So there's a difference between the word Satan and demon.
What's Satan mean?
Evil one.
Okay, well, I mean, 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse, your adversary of the devil. Yeah. He's just the adversary. Revelation 12 and verse 9, that old serpent, the devil, Satan, which deceives the whole world.
Deceiver. The
deceiver of the whole world. So how did Satan now get into one of the chosen 12 apostles? It says there that Satan entered into Judas.
The same way he enters the hearts of mankind today. You respond to that.
Can Satan enter into us today?
Absolutely.
Really?
Especially Christians.
Do what?
Especially Christians.
Especially,
That's who he's after.
ain't no need for him to go visit the ones he's already got, huh? Yeah, that's true. But how did Satan get into Judas was chosen for this job.
Lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, the pride of life.
Okay. But was he condemned to begin with?
No.
He could do not. No, of course not. Did Judas have a character flaw like we all have today? We've all got character flaws that we have to deal with.
Yes.
Was Judas a lover of money?
Yeah.
Notice John chapter 12. John chapter 12, we find Jesus now. He's back at Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house. We read part of this a while ago. Mary is going to take some expensive ointment. Expensive stuff. John chapter 12. Then Jesus 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. Now notice verse 3. Mary took a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly stuff now. She anointed the feet of Jesus with this expensive stuff. She wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the odor of this expensive ointment. Then said one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which is going to betray him. Jesus, verse 5, Jesus, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? Notice verse 6, this he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and he had the bag, and he bare the money that was in the bag. He was the treasurer.
Sticky fingers.
Sticky fingers, yeah. And to me, Linda, I've got the checkbook. I'm the treasurer. And I take that seriously now. I do. I take that seriously. Not that it's that big of a job, but I don't want to take anything that you can't do that. You just can't do that. Linda Dickey has more than once told us the story. Remember your daddy used to sell watermelons out in front of his house? And John David and Jason and Bradley, all three of them would be there during the summer selling watermelons. John David always kept the money because he was the oldest and he didn't trust these two little kids. They'd be coming in the house and he'd say, well, here comes Judas with the money. He's calling John David Judas. John David was, Judas has got the bag. Here he comes. And of course, that was a joke about that. But that was the case with Judas here. He was the treasurer. He kept account of all the money. Notice John chapter 13. John chapter 13, verse 26. Oh, now turn over there. They're at the Last Supper of the Passover feast. He's already told them that one of them is going to betray him. And notice verse 26, he it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. When he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto Judas, that thou doest, do quickly. No man at the table knew for what intent he told that to Judas. Some of them thought, because Judas had the money, that Jesus had told him, go buy the things that we're going to need for the next coming 7 days for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or he was supposed to go out and buy something and give it to the poor. They knew he had the money. Judas, you got something to do, go do it.
Don't you think Jesus knew that Satan had entered? Don't
Yeah.
you think that Jesus knew that Satan had entered Judas?
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah.
That comparison context.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. But it's not Jesus' fault, huh? Well, he's the one that handed him the sop.
Therefore, Jesus chose Judas to betray him.
Yes. No. But we've already decided it ain't the devil's fault, and it can't be Jesus' fault. Whatever I do wrong is Pat's fault. Everybody knows that. No, it's my fault. It's my fault. It's our fault. Whatever we do, we have to own of it. Couldn't he have given that to anybody else present? He singled out Judas now. Was Judas did he have an axe to grind? Go back with it, John chapter 12. He's asking about this costly ointment now. And Jesus had told him, notice what Jesus tells Judas, verse 7. Judas, let her alone. She just used this expensive ointment to wash your feet. We could have sold that for 300 pence and have more money in the bag. Judas, leave her alone. Was he offended? Possibly. I don't know that. But maybe he became offended by that. But anyway, Judas had the trait to be to have money, to have control of money.
If you'll notice 13:2, the devil had already put in the heart of Judas to do this thing.
Okay.
It was premeditated.
Yes, he had thought about it, but it wasn't the devil. It was
Judas. It was premeditated.
Yeah, he had that trait. Just like we all have traits today that we have to control, that we have to keep under control. But it's amazing now that one of the chosen 12, he knew Christ very well. He was able to teach and preach the gospel of Christ. He could cast out demons. He could perform miracles. It's amazing that someone like that could betray him. Can someone like me today betray Christ?
Yes.
Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 6 tells us, when a Christian falls away, it is impossible to renew them again, seeing that they crucify Christ in the flesh the second time. I can be guilty of betraying and crucifying Christ. Notice Hebrews chapter 10.
Great.
Yes, sir?
If I understand, the Passover was just one time a year, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because in one Leviticus or Deuteronomy says the 14th day of the first month.
Yes, sir.
So that just means there's just 1 month in every year that's like we got January.
Right.
It's just one January in 1 year. So
Right.
So that apparently, when Christ instituted the thing, did he keep it up? You think he kept it on the 14th day of the first month, as the Bible says, he kept the old commandments?
Yes, I think he did. He was there in Jerusalem for the Passover, which was going to be observed on the 14th day of their first month. Their first month may begin in the summertime. I'm not sure about that.
Mark he says it came about the second day of it. I can't remember how this.
Nope.
Pentecost came on the second day there or something. I can't remember how it read, but something about the second day.
Well, Mark and Matthew said that Pentecost, the day of Pentecost, this particular one was 2 days away.
Yeah.
is gonna happen in 2 days. It's what I refer to earlier.
That was a hard thing for those Jews to do, especially the Christians. Some of the old Christians, the old Jews, they kept the Passover.
Yes, yes,
But when Christ rose from the dead, they went to the first day of the week. That was a hard thing, probably,
yes.
to transfer in
Sure
their
it was.
lives. While on the Sabbath day, they took the Passover, but on maybe the next Sunday or Monday or something, on Sunday they had to go to the first day of the week.
Yes, yes, yes.
It was probably a little confusing with them people.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
To a certain extent.
You know, I wouldn't have known what to do. Should I observe the Passover? It's coming up again, next month. But I'm observing the Lord's Supper on the first day of every week. And you made a point there. Did they observe the Passover every first month, the 14th day of every first month of every year? Yeah, they did. Are we to observe the Lord's Supper every first day of the week? Yeah. It's a good reminder. This was a reminder for them, only it was an annual event. Notice Hebrews chapter 10, verse 26, talking to Christians here. Can I crucify? Can I betray Christ today? If I'm going to sin willfully, and I've received the knowledge of the truth, I know better. I need to understand that there remains no more sacrifice for my sins. Remember that they had crucified every prophet that the Lord sent to them. And the wrath of the Lord arose against these people until there was no remedy. He had it up to here with them. Eventually, God so loved the world that he sent his only Son, and they crucified him. And so if I'm going to sin willfully, after I know better, I need to understand he's done all he can do for me. That was it. He sent all that he had. Notice verse 28. He's going to give us an example here. You remember that the person who despised Moses' law died without mercy? They broke the law somehow. And they were stoned to death. Verse 29. He's posing a question for us to think about. How much sore punishment do you think is somebody worthy of? Now here's the person that we need to judge. The one who has trodden underfoot the Son of God. Use him as a doormat. Christian. But I don't care that much about him anymore. Trodden underfoot the Son of God. He's counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified as an unholy thing. The blood of Christ was shed on the cross in order that my sins are forgiven. Linda, that don't mean that much to me. I know better, but and he has insulted the Spirit of God's grace. How much more punishment is someone like that due that knows better than the one who died under the law of Moses when they violated the law of Moses? Yes, I can betray Christ. I can crucify him again today, just as Judas did back then. Anyone have any comment? We're out of time. Anybody? We'll begin, we'll stay with Judas a little bit more next Sunday. Probably about verse 4, Andy, we'll start next Sunday. Thank you for your help this morning. I've enjoyed the class.